but we couldn't persuade the mining industry to come round and be sensible.
Edward Heath was running out of options. He was only a short time away from calling in the army, to the horror of the Queen.
So, Mr. Heath, what do you propose as a next step?
After much discussion with my cabinet colleagues, I propose to introduce a state of emergency.
And when would this state of emergency commence?
The 14th, ma'am.
The 14th.
The debate begins on the 13th, ma'am, when the miners begin their overtime ban. So the actual state of emergency would come into force the following day, the 14th of November.
Princess Anne's wedding day.
It's not ideal, ma'am.
It really was not merely a declared state of emergency, it was an emergency, because the miners' threat to call a national strike, in effect, would have pulled the plug on the British economy, and the country could not have existed for long. Then it did seem, not necessarily so much to Heath, but certainly some of his colleagues, that the end of society was very, very close, that this really was a disastrously dangerous position.
But as the day of Anne's wedding finally dawned, the Queen took a deep breath and continued as if nothing else mattered.
What happens with the British people is when there's a huge crisis, economic or, war crisis or something, they tend to cluster for sort of comfort and continuity and certainty round the royal family. So it was a very popular wedding, and she looked good and he looked handsome. And there was actually a much bigger audience, so to speak, and the coverage in the papers than a lot of us suspected there would be.
The moment we've all been waiting for, and how lovely she looks. Now, we expected something quite different, and we've certainly got it today. Look at that wonderful girl.
£23.50 to take home. That's what we take home for 5 ships.
But to go without things, to go without, for instance, a turkey at Christmas.
I, Mark Anthony Peter. I, Mark Anthony Peter. Take thee, Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise.
But not everyone watching was wishing the royal couple well.
My wedded wife, to my wedded wife, to have and to hold, to have and to hold.
In his South London bedsit, a 26-year-old burglar with psychiatric problems called Ian Ball had his own designs on the Queen's daughter.
To my wedded husband, to have and to hold, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, cherish, and to obey, till death us to part.
Over at the Old Bailey, as Anne and Mark said their vows, 6 members of the IRA were convicted of detonating car bombs. They would be quickly replaced by others, soon to start the deadliest ever terrorist campaign on mainland Britain. The threat to the royal family was to become more real than it had ever been. The Queen would never be as vulnerable as she was in 1974. At first, she escaped on a foreign tour, leaving a country tearing itself apart as the fight between Heath and the unions came to standoff. While she was away, 11 people died when an IRA bomb exploded on a coach carrying army personnel and their wives on the M62.
Amongst the wreckage at the back of the coach, some of the debris of the explosion that killed 11. A wristwatch with the strap torn off.
Days later, the Queen flew home to give permission for a general election. It was to be fought under the slogan, "Who rules Britain, Heath or the miners?"
It's time for you to speak with your vote. It is time for you to say to the extremists, the militants, and to the plain and simple misguided, we've had enough.
As Ian Ball, the lone fantasist with an obsession with Princess Anne, learned how to fire a gun, the Queen waited anxiously to learn who was going to be her next Prime Minister.
Martin?
Sorry to disturb, ma'am. We have the results.
Mr. Heath has a majority.
No, ma'am.
Mr. Wilson?
No, ma'am.
My word.
Labour have 301 seats, the Conservatives 297, the rest, well, as you see.
So, who can command the Commons?
Ma'am, I have sought constitutional advice on the matter. The sovereign must observe the classical doctrine that we have a government. As long as Mr. Heath is able to stay in power, he must be allowed to do so.
So I am to be a spectator?
For the moment, ma'am. The Prime Minister is Prime Minister until he resigns. When this happens, the monarch must act.
I see. Please try to unconfuse the PM's office and ask them to let us know their plans at the earliest convenience.
Ma'am, Mr. Heath is on his way to the palace now.
17 hours after returning to number 10, those who'd braved the weather, which by now included heavy rain, got their reward. A brief sighting of the PM as he left Downing Street before the 4-minute drive through the night for the historic meeting with the Queen.
It was up to Ted Heath to see if he could cobble together some kind of working arrangement to keep his premiership going. So that's why he spends the weekend having talks with Jeremy Thorpe, the leader of the Liberal Party, to see if they can, patch up some kind of coalition.
Yes, Robert.
And what does the monarchy do? Okay, they might have the odd conversation here and there, put the feelers out, whatever.
What is the scenario the Queen is likely to be faced with?
But they really don't do anything. And I think that's to the Queen's credit, actually, and to the monarchy's credit.
After a nerve-wracking 24 hours, her old friend and ally was back.
He's in his element in this sort of situation. He's got that serious prime ministerial look on his face, but he's not prime minister yet by a long chalk.
We'd really all been through a battle. I mean, it hadn't been like a general election. It was a bit like the First World War over again in certain respects. And it was pretty obvious to a lot of people, not just politicians, that Wilson, who's very clever and very cute, he would win.
We've got a job to do. We can only do that job as one people, and I'm going right in to start that job now.
Surprisingly, for a British monarch, the ousting of a Conservative Prime Minister wasn't a calamity. Wilson had proved himself an ally she could rely on.
Good old Mr. Wilson's this very conservative figure whose response to all the turmoil of the 70s is, well, let's keep everything quiet. Well, that's what the Queen wants, because the one thing she doesn't want is somebody who's going to stir everything up and pit people against each other. So he's ideal from the Queen's point of view, and of course he's not Ted Heath.
Normality resumed. The Queen prepared to rejoin the royal tour of Asia.
Miss Wilson understands the Commonwealth, not so besotted with Europe. And he assures me he'll end the strike. And that's the most important thing. Bring people together again. What?
You fly home from the other side of the world, change prime ministers, fly straight back. Shouldn't you maybe slow down a bit?
Are you saying I'm too old?
No, but...
Don't worry about me. How are you and Mark getting on?
Mark's adapting, you know, to being one of us.
It takes time.
We've got a charity thing on Wednesday, Riding for the Disabled. They've made a film.
Well, if it's dull, don't let Mark sneak a nap. They watch us in the dark.
Oh, wouldn't the papers love that? It's got horses in it, Mummy. We'll both be wide awake, I promise. Bon voyage. Find time to rest.
Days after the Queen had returned to Indonesia, Anne was returning home from her charity film premiere.
No, I'm not. Including the water jump. I've done that course 100 times.
Princess Anne and Captain Phillips drove back in the official car along the Mall towards Buckingham Palace.
What the places is he playing at? Stay put, okay?
When I was first fired at, I didn't really realise I'd been shot in the shoulder. I was probably more upset because my gun had jammed.
Please get out of the car.
What?
Come with me.
No.
Switch off the engine, stay where you are. It'll only be for a couple of days.
Get off! Stop! I'm not coming with you!
Get out of the car!
Not bloody likely.
By then Ian Ball was pointing his gun to Princess Anne and speaking to her, and she, obviously very bravely, was chatting back to him.
What do you want from me?
I want 2 million.
I haven't got 2 million!
Then he obviously got distracted, which is why I was able to get into the vehicle.
Go! Go!
The chauffeur got shot, and I managed to get into the car to get between him and her. That was it, really. So I just kept going.
Put the gun down or I'll shoot! Open the door! Open the door!
He was pointing his gun in towards the back of the car.
Open the door!
No!
So I just stuck my right hand up in front of it. And I thought, well, if we kick a door open, it'll hit him. And he shot me in the abdomen.
What the hell are you doing? Come with me!
I'm not moving.
Come with me! Last chance!
Well, after the shooting, the Mall is completely closed off here tonight. Up behind me here, several dozen police cars. I gather about 100 policemen drafted in.
The provisional IRA were extremely active at that time, so one's first thoughts were always the obvious ones. You know, what if? We realised just how near to a really terrible tragedy it had been.
When I heard about how she dealt with it all, I actually felt sorry for the gunman, because she was very cool, very tough, and there are certain people who, like Princess Anne, don't put up with these sort of things, but I don't think she even thought of herself as being brave. You know, that's what one does.